simple field with some poppies today. A nice simple landscape. I've got 4 colours here. I've got cobalt blue, sap green, cadmium red and raw sienna, just squirted neat into the palette. I'm going to get my wash brush, pop some water into a sky. A nice big sky today. Make sure I'm coating this with plenty of water. And then I've got round number 10, I'm going to load that with water and then dab into the cobalt blue. Circular motion. And keep reloading with paint. If you press the brush down, it stops the paint going too far. A few little summery clouds. Come along this horizon line. It's nice to get uneven shapes with your clouds. Giving that a rinse out, I'm going to load the brush a little bit and I'm going to just dab in lightly to the cadmium red. So I'm just getting a little bit on the brush, dabbing that in, dab it off. I'm just going to take a little bit into the sky. So if you dab very lightly, then you're not going to get too much. I just want to give a bit of variation really. And then mixing on the paper, it's going to give a few sort of hues of purple, a little bit of red in there, it's quite nice. Just make sure that you're doing it very lightly and you won't pick up too much then on the brush. If you do pick up too much, then you've just got to spread it around a bit so it's not too dark. Okay, I'm going to go to a small flat now. This is a 1 centimetre flat. Make sure that it's nice and clean. Dabbing off on some kitchen towel. I'm going to dab in to some sap green one side, some raw sienna the other side. So I've got neat paint on each side and then I'm going to dab. Dab and twist. So this is in the bottom of the sky, which is still nice and wet. I'm going to start to get some foliage, some trees appearing. I'm going to dip in a little bit of cobalt blue, a little bit of sap green. So one side of the brush and then the other side of the brush. So you're getting a variety of different colours happening as well. I'm just moving along. I'll dip into some raw sienna, some sap green again. So just tap, 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 and I'm rolling the brush a little bit between my fingers so that I'm getting a variety of strokes. A little bit more cobalt blue on this one. If you keep the darker tone towards the bottom, that works quite nicely. It gives shadow. This is just straight sap green going on here. I'm varying the height of the trees. I want to make sure that it doesn't look too uniform. So you want different levels, different shapes. I've got some that are a bit pointier, some that are a bit rounder. And then here I'm going to do a bigger one. So there's a bit more sap green, a bit more cobalt blue. So it shows up against that cadmium in the sky, I'm going to go bigger. So I'm leaving gaps. I'm twisting a little bit, but leaving a gap. Now you can dab back in any of these with a bit darker if you want to. It's working really nicely. Just give that brush a bit of a rinse off. I've got a long thin brush here. This is a rigger, and I just need to make a colour that will work for a tree trunk. So I'm using just 4 colours today. And it's quite nice to limit your colours because you're learning what each of those colours do. So if I take a little dab of the cadmium red and a little dab of the green, that will make a brown. Because they are complementary colours, they will mix to make a lovely brown. And that will do us nicely for a tree trunk. So I'm just going to dab a little bit off onto the kitchen towel because I don't want it to be too flowy. And then I can just come in those little bits and pop in this tree trunk and a few branches that you might be able to see. You don't want too much really. This is all in the distance, we want to keep it in the distance. Have a little bit of a branch there. Okay, then I'm going to pick up my wash brush again and we're going to come onto this bottom section. Now I'm going to leave a very fine dry line between because I've not dried that off. I don't want it to spread in. Also, it works nicely as a nice highlight as well. There's plenty of water on there. Load my brush up with water. This is my round number 10 again. I'm going to come in with the raw sienna. So I'm going to come as close as I can to that edge. Without touching in too much. And I've got horizontal strokes. And we're going to create a nice base here. Give my brush a little bit of a rinse. I'm going to dab into a little bit of sap green. So the sap green is quite a fresh colour, but when it's mixed with the raw sienna it's less fresh. So it's perfect summery colour here. I want you, as you come forward, to get less of the green on. Keep it nice and yellow in the foreground. Okay, I'm going to swap down to round number 6 now. It's a bit smaller brush, check that that's nice and clean. Load it with water. I'm going to dip into this cadmium red. And I'm going to start to create some poppies. So this is just dabbing in and letting the paint do its thing. You've got to make sure you've got water on the brush. I'm going to do random dabs. This is creating poppy shapes. You can have some bigger ones towards the foreground, some smaller ones towards the background. So you can go lighter and press on harder if you want a bigger one. It's a bigger shape. And I basically want you to make them random. So lots and lots of different shapes. These will all work as poppies. Lots and lots of little dabs, bigger dabs. So I've done some bigger ones this side. You can have a few little patches in the distance, so just gonna do a few wiggles, little patches of poppies. The hazards you've got with this is that the red and the green will make a mucky looking brown, which is what we did to make the tree trunks. So you've got to make sure that you don't overload with the green, and if you go in with the red you want to try and hit a raw sienna area, because that will hold much better as red. If you're going into the distance, then you can tend to get away with it a little bit more. So if I pop some in here, because they'll be in the distance, they'll be more shadowed. So you would get away with those few little bits of poppies here and there. Rinse my brush out. Going to dab into the sap green. And I just want to start to create some foliage really in this foreground. Whilst it's still a little bit damp, I can do a little bit more later. I need to have some sort of base in here. So I'm just stroking upwards. I'm coming to the poppies. Some of it is a little bit drier now, but it's still working enough. I'm trying not to come through the poppies. I want to keep them nice and vibrant. So you're just getting a nice foreground feel here. You can do a few towards the background. If we've got some bigger ones, they need a bit of a stem. It's having enough for them to look like they're not floating. So you can just dab a few random dabs around. These are the ones. And that will be enough for them to look like that they're not floating in midair. There's some sort of base in there. Okay, so with your long, thin rigger, if the paint's wet enough, you'll be able to pull a stem down. If it's not, then I just want you to use a little bit of your brown. So that was the red and the green mixed together. So just make sure I've got plenty of that. And then you can start to create some stems. Especially on these bigger ones. And then if we take a little bit of blue into some of that brown, it'd make a much more darker colour, and we can use that for the centres for some of these poppies. So I'm just dabbing a light bit in. Doesn't want to be in the centre of every single one, you want to vary where you're putting this, and the smaller ones don't even attempt, it's just the bigger ones you want that in. You can dab more in on some, less in on others. The bigger ones can take a little bit more. It's still very slightly damp, so it's fuzzing just a little bit. The paint's nice and thick, so it's not going to create a watermark. And that's holding together nicely now. And dip back into the brown if you want to do a few leafy bits, the browny greeny colour. Pop a few on some of the stems, it's just a flick upwards really. Just all adding that little bit of interest in the foreground. You can come in with a little bit more of the green. I'm mixing that with the brown to make it a bit greener. And you can have a few longer stems in here where you could have some corn on. Just going to pop a few through. It just gives a little bit more interest in the foreground. If you can go a bit higher in places, it blends everything together. So with that green you can just pop a few little bits. Could be seed heads, could be corn, could be grass seed. It's just giving that little bit more interest here. I'm going to have another one in here. So this just dabbing at the top, randomly, either side of that stem, just to make it look like grass or corn. Okay, hope you've enjoyed it.